Hey guys, so I wanted to make this video because I was able to read the novelization of The Last Jedi and I wanted to talk about it in this video. Mostly what I'm going to talk about in this video, and you probably already guessed it, is I'm going to talk about the Kylo and Rey moments in The Last Jedi novelization. And I'm also going to talk about why I think after reading this that Rey is a Kenobi. If you guys have watched my videos, you know how much I want her to be a Kenobi, why I think she is one, why that makes the most sense to me that she would be a Kenobi. And my impression after reading the novelization, that there was tiny hints that she was related to Obi-Wan. So first, I'm going to talk about the Kylo and Rey moments and the ones I liked in the novelization. And then I'm going to talk about why I think Rey is related to Obi-Wan based off of the Last Jedi novelization. So, Kylo and Rey. I like the moments of Kylo and Rey in the Last Jedi novelization, and if I'm being honest, that's why I really wanted to read it, was for the Kylo and Rey moments, and I wanted to read it to see if I could get some clues for episode 9, and I think that's why a lot of people wanted to read the novelization too, because there were clues in the Force Awakens novelization. There were a lot of hidden clues in the Force Awakens novelization that were suggesting that a romance was going to happen between Kylo and Rey. So I really like the moments when Rey showed up, when she basically mailed herself to Kylo, and I liked how in the novelization it says that Kylo knew who was in the space pod. He knew who was there before it even opened. And he smiles when he sees her. In the novelization, when she first shows up, he smiles when he sees her in the space pod, and then his face goes to being stern when he sees Luke's lightsaber, when he sees Anakin's lightsaber. So when Kylo is taking Rey to Snoke and they walk together and they had that elevator ride, there's a lot of banter between Kylo and Rey in the Last Jedi novelization. There's a moment when Kylo says, "That belongs to me," when he sees the lightsaber. And Rey has this feisty comeback. She basically says, "Funny, because it was calling to me, it wasn't calling to you." After she says that, Kylo begins to smile, talks about how he begins to smile. And then he has a little flirty moment with her when he says, "You're in no position to dictate." I love that moment, and Ben is just like his dad and his grandfather. They all love their strong-willed brunettes. A moment that I really loved between them in the novelization is when Rey goes to the cave and she feels alone, and she thinks to herself that there's someone she can talk to about the cave, somebody who understands the loneliness. And she feels his presence, and then when they see each other, she thinks about how she could touch his hand, she could touch his face, she could touch his hair. And how she feels a surge of relief when she sees him. I absolutely love those moments, of course, and Rey fantasizing about touching Kylo. Not that I blame her. I was being seduced to the dark side when I was watching The Last Jedi. I really enjoyed during their Force Bond sessions, I really enjoyed his curiosity about her and how he was intrigued with her, which that was shown with the movie with Force Awakens, and that was talked about with the novelization Force Awakens, but I really like that. There's a moment when Rey is looking at the water, and when she was feeling the rain on Act 2, and Kylo is watching her, and he's basically intrigued by her happiness. I love that moment, and it's so fitting because her name is Rey. Like a ray of light, a ray of hope, a ray of sunshine. Other moments that I loved the description of the look in Kylo's eyes. It talks about when Rey is speaking to him throughout the novelization. And this was obvious in the movie too, but I liked how it described how he had hurt in his eyes. It talks about his eyes being haunted, I believe, and it talks about his eyes being needy, which I love that, and hungry. It literally says when he's talking to Rey, I think it's the Force Bond session when she's talking about the whole why did you do it with Han thing, and the whole thing when he's like, did you really know what happened? Did Luke tell you what happened? It talks about his gaze being hungry towards her, which was so great and so funny. Because in the movie, his gaze was hungry. Every time he looked at Rey, it was so sexual. So I love the fact that it was the perfect description in the book of what he was like with her in the movie. I also like the part when Rey calls him a monster and he says, "Yes, I am." And it says in the book that he doesn't say it with any menace, but misery. And that was perfect because when I watched the movie, when I saw that scene for the first time when he said, "Yes, I'm a monster," it was like he hated himself. It was spoken with self-hatred. And I remember thinking during that scene, he's not a real Sith, because a real Sith would like not get emotional looking or say it with self-hatred. They would not have any emotion. Like if it was Palpatine, he would have just laughed. He would have just had an evil cackle. Or if it would have been another Sith, it would have been like "foolish Jedi" or something like that. Or they just would have stared evilly or said some kind of mean insult or something. It also talks about in the book how his eyes have, Kylo's eyes, how they have longing and sorrow. And during the showdown with Luke, it talks about how he has fury and hurt in his eyes. I loved how that was described in the book, because when I watched the movie, and I talked about this in one of my videos, how to me he came off as somebody who was very angry and very hurt during that whole showdown of Luke. So I loved how they described that in the book. And also his fury and hurt, it's not just with Luke, but it also talks in the book, and this was in the movie too, but it talks about in the book how it's also associated with Rey, because he felt rejected by her. And I actually liked in the book where he talks about Rey, and it says that he says her name like poison. And I surprisingly like that, because Rey is his poison. Rey is the one that has distracted Kylo from the dark side. He has a soft spot for her. And of course he'd be angry because it was like, hey, I found someone that understands me, and we can be together, and we can rule as King and Queen of the Galaxy. That's what he thought was gonna happen. It was like, hey, I found my soulmate, and we can rule together as King and Queen, as Emperor and Empress. I mean, that proposal to Rey, the whole join me proposal, that might as well have been a marriage proposal in space. Only thing that was missing from that Kylo wasn't on one knee and did not have a ring. I would have been like, yes, I will be your empress. I'll be your space queen. I would have taken Kylo's hand. I guess I'm a Sith, but I really enjoyed in the novelization how it described how he was amused by her, which I thought he was in the movie too, but I like the descriptions of how she amuses him in the novelization. Something that I thought was pretty interesting, and it kept getting repeated over and over in the book, was about how Kylo had offered to train Rey. Talks about how Kylo urged Rey to train her, and it says in the book how he almost pleaded with her to train her, which I thought that was a good description, because I thought that was obvious, because it was obvious he wanted to train Rey in The Force Awakens. That even at that point in Force Awakens, he was drawn to her. He wanted to train her. And something else I thought was interesting is it talks about how Rey rejected Kylo, rejected him to teach her, rejected his offer, for her to just be rejected by Luke. I thought that was kind of interesting, because my impression of that, the way it was worded, seemed like Rey kind of regretted not taking Kylo's offer. I thought it was interesting that they kept mentioning that it kept being talked about in the book how Kylo wanted to teach her, and several times Rey thinks about how she rejected his offer and all this stuff. So it kind of makes me think, is Kylo gonna be the one that teaches Rey more about the Force? I have wondered that before. I have wondered, is the twist going to be that Kylo will be the one that teaches more about the Force to Rey? And when I read this in the Last Jedi novelization, it made me think about that even more. It made me believe that could be possible even more so. I think that'd be a pretty cool twist if Kylo taught more about the Force to Rey, if he went away from the dark side and they both became Grey Jedi. I think it would be so ridiculous if Darth Vader could be redeemed, but not Kylo. Like, I feel like that would be so ridiculous to me if Darth Vader can be redeemed, but not Kylo. I also think that Kylo has a high chance of redemption. I want to hope for a happy ending with Kylo and Rey. But I also believe that he has a high chance for redemption too, because he really didn't have anything to lose, really, in The Last Jedi. He found a companion with Rey. He found someone who understood him, and he thought that they were going to be king and queen. They were going to rule together. They were going to rule the galaxy. And so there really wasn't a lot for him to lose to completely change, to go completely away from the dark side. Then Rey leaves and she slams the door on his face, and the scene with her slamming the door on his face is just like the movie. Kylo's all in despair and mournful and eyes full of sorrow and all of that. But he is going to be miserable without Rey, and I think it's going to be like how Anakin, when he says to Obi-Wan or Jar Jar, I think he says it to both of them, but he says how he had thought about Padme every day, every moment, all the time when they parted. There wasn't a day that had gone by where he didn't think about her. And I think it will be the same way with Kylo. And like I've said before, Kylo and Rey's relationship is very similar to Anakin and Padme's. And I don't know how big of a time jump they'll have for episode 9. I assume some time will pass, kind of like how it was in Empire Strikes Back. But there will be a long amount of time between The Last Jedi and episode 9, obviously much longer than between Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. So I feel like that whole quote with Anakin saying, I thought about her no matter like how long it had been, he thought about her the whole time they were parted. They were separated for years. So I think it will be the same thing. Kylo and Rey, and there were direct mentions of Anakin and Obi-Wan in the Last Jedi novelization. They are directly addressed, and I feel like that is a big clue for episode 9, because J.J. Abrams has said that episode 9 is going to tie back into the prequels, and I believe it will. And I think with just the fact that Obi-Wan and Anakin are directly addressed in the novelization of The Last Jedi, and they were addressed too in the movie, it just wasn't explicitly addressed, but they're addressed even more in The Last Jedi novelization. So I feel like that is going to have a lot of impact, that Obi-Wan and Anakin's presence are definitely going to be in episode 9, that they're going to have some kind of impact. So I'm going to talk about why I think The Last Jedi novelization, why I felt like, to me, that it was hinting that Rey was a Kenobi. So firstly, I'm going to read this little passage from The Last Jedi novelization, and this is during the fight with Kylo and Rey against the guards. She hadn't seen the thrust coming, but the Force had warned her. Stretch out with your feelings. So first of all, stretch out with your feelings. Well, who does that sound like? That sounds like Obi-Wan. And it's italicized. So, to me, that seems like that's somebody speaking. And Rey wouldn't know who was speaking to her. She wouldn't know that Obi-Wan was speaking to her. She didn't know whose voices she was hearing in Force Awakens during her vision. So Rey would just think it was the Force talking to her, and Rey is powerful, but Rey's still a newbie. She's still learning, so she wouldn't know that she could talk to another person through the Force, like hear another person, except maybe with Kylo, but that she could hear a Force ghost. She wouldn't know about that. And that would be really cool if Obi-Wan is talking to her just like how he was talking to her in Force Awakens when he said, Rey, these are your first steps. Now I'm going to read another passage that makes me think Rey is the Kenobi. To his delight, he found Rey strong, even more powerful than he'd imagined. So this is the scene where Rey is being presented before Snoke, and someone had told me about this, how this passage, how it sounded so much like Obi-Wan's quote when he says in New Hope, "Strike me down now, I'll become more powerful than you can imagine." So I feel like the fact that there are multiple passages, even just this passage, and I knew about this before I read it, but I didn't know about the other one about Rey hearing stretch out your feelings. I didn't know about that until I read the book. So just this passage alone sounds like Rey is a Kenobi, but the fact that Rey is hearing stretch out your feelings or stretch your feelings or whatever, that to me sounds like that is multiple clues for Rey to be a Kenobi. And I honestly can't think of how they could connect the prequels if Rey isn't related to somebody. Like, I feel like her being related to Obi-Wan would perfectly connect everything, and I honestly don't know how else other way they could do it. I don't think it could connect if Rey is Obi-Wan's granddaughter. If she's not related to someone, I don't know how it could connect. Also, in the book, it talks about how Kylo has seen her memories and her fears, just like how she has seen his memories and fears. And so, since he's seen her fears and her memories, and it talks about, and I got this impression from the movie, but they explicitly say it in the book, how Rey's worst fear is being abandoned. That's her worst fear, is that her parents just left her there. So if Kylo can feel her feelings and see her memories and her fears, and if she believed she was abandoned and that was in her head, he would believe that that was the truth, but it doesn't mean that it is or that it is the total truth. Just like the movie, Kylo and Rey's Force bond is really strong in the Last Jedi novelization. And during that scene, when she's being tortured by Snoke, Kylo can feel her pain and her panic. And with Force bonds, with Star Wars, they can feel each other's pain, they can feel each other's feelings. I've mentioned this in one of my theory videos, but there's a book called Rey's Story, and it says in the book that Rey has no memory of her parents. So she has no memory of her parents. How can she be 100% sure that they abandoned her and sold her for drinking money? Now, I recently rewatched The Last Jedi on DVD, and I watched the scene of Kylo and Rey when he says that whole bit, how she was sold off for drinking money. And if you just take away the interviews, the contradicting interviews, and you just take away what Rian Johnson has said, and he has contradicted himself a couple times, but if you just like scratch that out and you're just judging it based off of the scene, well, during the scene when Kylo was talking to Rey, dark side music is playing. And Kylo says, oh, your parents were nobodies and they left you and they were drunkards and all that. Dark side music plays. There's dark side music playing during that scene. And so, to me, whenever dark side music is playing, that often means that's not the truth. When dark side music is playing, that doesn't really make me feel convinced that that is the truth. And Luke talks to Obi-Wan in the Return of the Jedi, and Obi-Wan, says the whole bit, oh, what I told you was true from a certain point of view, right? Well, there's no dark side music playing. It's a long scene. They sit down. They talk about it. The scene of Kylo and Rey with the supposed revelation, it was really, really quick. It was really fast. It was really, they were both really emotional. With Obi-Wan and Luke, there was no other scenes. Like, that was a long scene. That scene with Luke and Obi-Wan, and they had that discussion about Vader being Luke's dad. It's a long, drawn-out scene. Well, Kylo and Rey, it's really quick. It's really rushed. And Kylo is not going to, like, want to investigate whether or not it's true what he saw about Rey's parents or her lineage or whatever, because he wanted her to be with him. He wanted her to let go of the past, kill the past, forget about, you know, wanting your family, like, forget about all of that, because I love you, I want you to be with me. Even though he said it, you know, in his Sith way. That's what he was saying to her during that scene. And during that scene, he becomes more frustrated as they talk. And I feel like I caught it even more when I watched it on DVD. When Kylo and Rey are talking, he gets even more frustrated that she won't let go. He gets frustrated that she's not budging. That he thinks that she's not letting go of the past. And that frustrates him because he wants her to be with him. So, from my perspective, from just watching it, if you don't include the interviews, to me, I felt like that wasn't the truth. Like, I feel like, just from watching it, that Rey is related to someone. And the thing with interviews, I feel like a lot of times they can be confusing. Because they can't say, like, what's going to happen. They all have contracts. So, there are certain things they can or can't say. So, you don't know sometimes. Are they just saying this, like, as a lie? Is this the truth? Now, I think sometimes you can tell they're telling the truth. Like, I remember the interview with John Boyega when he said that Rey and Finn weren't going to have a romance. They were just friends. And he said this shortly before The Last Jedi came out. And he said that the romance in these movies was going to be very unexpected. It wasn't going to go the way you thought it was going to go. And he said how he and Daisy Ridley did not play it like it was a romance. That they played it just like they were friends. So, before I close, I want to go back to Obi-Wan for a second. So, also, another reason why I think Rey is a Kenobi based off of the novelization of The Last Jedi is before Luke dies, he hears a voice that tells him to let go. And it says in the book that he doesn't know if it's just from a memory or if it's a voice speaking to him. And who else could that be but Obi-Wan? And I feel like it was Obi-Wan speaking to Luke. And I also love that because in the book, the novel Ahsoka, there's a scene with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn comes to Obi-Wan as a Force ghost. And he says, Obi-Wan, let go. So I absolutely love the comparison between those two scenes. If you guys enjoyed my video, please give it a big thumbs up. Please like it and subscribe. If you guys have any theories you'd like to share, please let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you guys. So overall, I like the scenes of Kylo and Rey in the Last Jedi novelization. I do wish that there could have been more. I wish there could have been more scenes with Kylo and Rey in the Last Jedi novelization. I wish there could have been some new scenes. And I liked all the Obi-Wan references and the references to the prequels. And I hope that those are clues that Rey is a Kenobi. I also like to ask people certain things that they like about Star Wars at the end of my videos. And I like hearing what people got to say and what their favorite thing with Star Wars is. So I'd like to hear from you guys. What is your favorite lightsaber duel in Star Wars? My all-time favorite lightsaber duel is in Phantom Menace when Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn fight against Darth Maul. And my other favorite lightsaber duels in Star Wars, even though it's sad, the lightsaber duel between Anakin and Obi-Wan is really good in Revenge of the Sith. And I love the lightsaber duel with Kylo and Rey against the guards in The Last Jedi. I also love the lightsaber duel between Ahsoka and Anakin in Star Wars Rebels, even though that's not a lightsaber fight, a lightsaber duel from any of the movies. I absolutely love that fight scene with Darth Vader and Ahsoka. That is one of my favorite lightsaber duels. It's so emotional, and Ahsoka is a badass. thank you guys so much for watching, and please hit the notification bell to get notifications. I'll see you guys next time, and remember, may the Force be with you.
Leia. I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.